Hey y'all, it is Wednesday and we are moving on to Number the Stars chapter 10, and oh my, is today a good one. So this is not the climax of the story, but this is definitely a wow moment in the rising action. So think about Plot Mountain. In the first couple of chapters, we get the setting. Well, in the exposition, we get the setting, we get the characters, and we get the problem. And then as we go through the rising action, there are all these moments that have us wanting to continue turning the page to find out what happens next and those types of things. So this is a rising action event that is definitely a whopper, and it's an awesome one. So we're going to go on to chapter 10 today. I am going to tell you that chapter 10 ends on a cliffhanger, and we will not be going on to chapter 11 right away because tomorrow you will be taking your chapter 6 through 10 quiz, which is open book and open note. Make sure you're studying your vocabulary, and it's 17 points. So with vocabulary, words, and comprehension, it ends up being 17 points. So take your time, really think about the questions that are being asked of you. I think you'll do a great job on it. Just know that it's open book and open note. Then we'll deal with this. Chapter 10, Number the Stars today. Tomorrow, your chapter 6 through 10 quiz, open book, open note. All right, and then we'll go from there. So today's word of the day is casket. And this would actually be like a casket, what you probably know as a casket. This would be the kind of like a rectangular prism box that is used to bury the deceased, bury the dead. Okay, so it was talked about in chapter 9 with Great Aunt Birdie, and it's going to be talked about again in chapter 10. So word of the day is casket, and this would be the box that you are laid to rest in or buried in. And then today's skill is predicting. So we're kind of circling back around because we've done some predicting before, but since chapter 10 ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger, it gives you a question about prediction. So it's just one question today in the exit ticket for predicting. Make sure you do that so you can get your points for your exit ticket. And then, like I said, tomorrow you'll take your quiz. All right, so here we go. My book's backwards and upside down. Chapter 10 of Number the Stars. And you can follow along with me on your PDF if you want to, or you can just sit back and listen and enjoy the story. Just make sure you're paying attention. I know it's easy to get distracted sometimes, but you really need to focus. And if you need to take breaks, feel free to take breaks. So pause the video, come back to it, grab yourself a snack. You could be eating a snack while you're watching. Just make sure you're paying attention. All right, here we go. Chapter 10. Title. Okay, so let us open the casket. If there is no Great Aunt Birdie, then who is in this casket? All right, here we go. Chapter 10, let us open the casket. You are all here now, Uncle Henrik said, looking around the living room. I must go. Anne-Marie stood in the wide doorway looking in from the hall. The baby slept now, and its mother looked tired. Her husband sat beside her, his arm across her shoulders. The old man's head was still bent. Peter sat alone, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. It was clear that he was in deep thought. Okay, so let me make sure you understand who all is at the house right now. So at Uncle Henrik's house, you have Anne-Marie, Anne-Marie's mom, and Kirsty, but Kirsty is sleeping. So in this living room with this casket in the living room, which was common then, and maybe even common in Denmark now, I don't know, but calling hours wouldn't be in a church or in a funeral home. They might have been in the person's home. So let me go back. You have Anne-Marie, you have Mrs. Johansson, Uncle Henrik, Peter Nielsen, Ellen, Ellen's mom, Ellen's dad, the young couple, the young woman and young man with the baby, and the old man. Okay, so all of these people are now at Uncle Henrik's house for the morning, M-O-U-R-N-E, like the sadness, the wake, the calling hours. for this great Aunt Bertie who doesn't exist. And they're all sitting in the living room now. And Uncle Henrik is saying, I have to go. And everybody else is just kind of sitting there and they're being very quiet. And there's just candlelight. No lights are on in the house. And here we go. So Peter sat alone, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. It was clear that he was deep in thought. On the sofa, Ellen sat between her parents, one hand clasped tightly in her mother's. She looked up at Anne-Marie, but didn't smile. Anne-Marie felt a surge of sadness. The bond of their friendship had not broken, but it was as if Ellen had moved now into a different world, the world of her own family and whatever lay ahead for them. The elderly bearded man looked up suddenly as Uncle Henrik prepared to go. Ooh, I think I said him, but maybe I didn't. I forget. But the old man with the beard. God keep you safe, he said in a firm but quiet voice. Henrik nodded. God keep us all safe, he replied. Then he turned and left the room. A moment later, Anne-Marie heard him leave the house. Mama brought the teapot from the kitchen and a tray of cups. Anne-Marie helped her pass the cups around. No one spoke. Anne-Marie, Mama whispered to her in the hall. You may go to bed if you want to. It is very late. Anne-Marie shook her head, but she was tired. She could see that Ellen was too. Her friend's head was leaning on her mother's shoulder, and her eyes closed now and then. Finally, Anne-Marie went to the empty rocking chair in the corner of the living room and curled there with her head against its soft padded back. She dozed, but was startled from her half-sleep by the sudden sweep of headlights through the sheer curtains and across the room as a car pulled up outside. The car door slammed. Everyone in the room tensed, but no one spoke. She heard, as if in a recurring nightmare, the pounding on the door, and then the heavy, frighteningly familiar staccato of boots on the kitchen floor. The woman with the baby gasped and began suddenly to weep or cry. The male accented voice from the kitchen was loud. We have observed, he said, that an unusual number of people have gathered at this house tonight. What is the explanation? There has been a death, Mama's voice replied calmly. It is always our custom to gather and pay our respects when a family member dies. I am sure you are familiar with our customs. One of the officers pushed Mama ahead of him from the kitchen and entered the living room. There were others behind him. They filled the wide doorway. As always, their boots gleamed. Their guns, their helmets, all of them gleamed in the candlelight. Anne-Marie watched as the man's eyes moved around the room. He looked for a long time at the casket. Then he moved his gaze, focusing on each person in turn. When his eyes reached her, she looked back at him steadily. Who died? He asked harshly. No one answered. They watched Anne-Marie, and she realized that the officer was directing the question right at her. Now she knew for certain what Uncle Henrik had meant when he said when he had talked to her in the barn. To be brave came more easily if you knew nothing. She swallowed. My great Aunt Bertie, she lied in a firm voice. The officer moved forward suddenly across the room to the casket. He placed one gloved hand on its lid. Poor great Aunt Bertie, he said in a condescending voice. I do know your customs, he said, turning his gaze toward Mama, who still stood in the doorway. And I know it's the custom to pay one's respects by looking your loved one in the face. It seems odd to me that you have closed this coffin up so tightly. His hand was in a fist, and he rubbed it across the edge of the polished lid. Why is it not open? He demanded. Let us open it and take one last look at great Aunt Bertie. Ooh, see, it's as if this soldier knows that great Aunt Bertie is not in there, or at least he's questioning. He's suspicious that there is no great Aunt Bertie and that great Aunt Bertie is not in that casket. So he's kind of saying like, well, let's open it up and see. But since there is no great Aunt Bertie, I I feel like they're afraid to open it and show Great Aunt Bertie, unless there is a body in there, and then they could pass that off as Great Aunt Bertie. Oh gosh, I can't. Oh. Anne-Marie saw Peter across the room stiffen in his chair, lift his chin, and reach slowly with one hand toward his side. What do you think he's reaching for? Mama walked quickly across the room, directly to the casket. He called it a coffin. That would be a synonym. Mama walked quickly across the room, directly to the casket, directly to the officer. "You're right," she said. "The doctor said it should be closed because Aunt Bertie died of typhus. And he said that there was a chance the germs would still be there, would still be dangerous. But what does he know? Only a country doctor, and an old man at that. Surely typhus germs wouldn't linger in a dead person. And dear Great Aunt Bertie, I have been longing to see her face, to kiss her goodbye. Of course we will open the casket. I'm glad you suggested." With a swift motion, the Nazi officer slapped Mama across her face. She staggered backward, and a white mark on her cheek darkened. "You foolish woman," he spat, "to think that we have any interest in seeing the body of your diseased aunt. You can open it after we leave," he said. With one gloved thumb, he pressed the candle flame into darkness. The hot wax spattered the table. Put all these candles out, he said, "or pull the curtains." Then he strode to the doorway and left the room. Motionless, silent, one hand to her cheek, Mama listened. They all listened as the uniformed men left the house. In a moment, they heard the car doors, the sound of its engine, and finally they heard it drive away. "Mama!" cried Anne-Marie. Her mother shook her head quickly and glanced at the open window covered only by the sheer curtain. Anne-Marie understood. There might still be soldiers outside, watching, listening. Peter stood and drew the dark curtains across the windows. He relit the extinguished candle. Then he reached for the old Bible that had always been there on the mantel. He opened it quickly and said, "I will read a psalm." His eyes turned to the page he had opened at random, and he began to read in a strong voice. "Oh, praise the Lord. How good it is to sing psalms to our God. How pleasant to praise him. The Lord is rebuilding Jerusalem. He gathers in the scattered sons of Israel. It is he who heals the broken in spirit and binds up their wounds. He who numbers the stars one by one." Mama sat down and listened. Gradually, they each began to relax. Anne-Marie could see the old man across the room moving his lips as Peter read. He knew the ancient psalm by heart. Anne-Marie didn't. The words were unfamiliar to her, and she tried to listen, tried to understand, tried to forget the war and the Nazis, tried not to cry, tried to be brave. The night breeze moved the dark curtains at the open windows. Outside, she knew the sky was speckled with stars. How could anyone number them one by one, as the psalm said? There were too many. The sky was too big. Ellen had said that her mother was frightened of the ocean, that it was too cold and too big. Well, the sky was too, thought Anne-Marie. The whole world was. Too cold, too big, and too cruel. Peter read on in his firm voice, though it was clear he was tired. The long minutes passed. They seemed hours. Finally, still reading, he moved quietly to the window. He closed the Bible and listened to the quiet night. Then he looked around the room. "Now," he said, "it is time now." First, he closed the windows. Then he went to the casket and opened the lid. And that's the end. Chapter 11 is next. So today you are making a prediction. What's in the casket? What do you think is in the casket? And why do you think that it is whatever it is? Is it a person? Is it a thing? What is it? And why do you think so? That is your exit ticket for chapter 10. Answer that prediction question. What do you think is in the casket and why? And then study your vocabulary. Maybe work a little bit on your ABC book. Tomorrow will be the quiz. And that will be it for tomorrow. So you'll just be taking the quiz tomorrow. That'll be on Thursday. All right, guys. I will see you again on Friday then. All right. Bye, everybody.